You know, just a few months ago, the US-India relationship was the talk of the town, celebrated as this cornerstone of global strategy. Leaders were all in on something called Mission 500, a plan to hit $500 billion in trade. Well, today, that friendship is absolutely on the rocks, caught up in one of the most sudden and, frankly, shocking trade disputes we've seen in a long, long time.
So the big question is, how did we even get here? How does a partnership that took decades to build just fall apart so fast? We're going to connect the dots for you, from what seems like high-level political drama all the way down to the real, painful economic fallout on the ground.
And it really all kicked off with one single staggering number: 50%. The Trump administration slapped a 50% total tariff on a huge range of Indian exports. Just to give you some perspective on that, that is one of the highest punitive tariffs the U.S. has put on any major trading partner. It's a huge deal.
But that 50% isn't just some abstract number on a policy document, right? It translates directly into human cost. I mean, let's just take one of India's key industries, the leather sector down in Tamil Nadu. In that one area, an estimated 75,000 jobs are now at risk. That's like the entire workforce of a medium-sized city just facing unemployment almost overnight.
Okay, so let's get into it. Section 1, a friendship on the rocks. Like we said, just months ago, the goal was Mission 500, $500 billion in trade. It was a symbol of this growing alliance. Now, all that optimism, it's been completely replaced by some serious tension and, frankly, deep mistrust.
And the speed of this collapse is just breathtaking. Look at this timeline. On August 1st, an initial 25% tariff hits. Less than 4 weeks later, on August 27th, they double it to 50%. By the beginning of September, you have the Indian government scrambling, trying to cut domestic taxes just to absorb some of the shock. A full-blown crisis in just over a month. Wild.
Which brings us to Section 2, from snubs to sanctions. I mean, what could possibly justify such an aggressive move against a strategic partner? Well, it turns out there are two very different stories about what really sparked this fire.
So here's the official story from the White House. It's about India continuing to buy Russian oil. But a lot of analysts and insiders are suggesting the real story is something else entirely. Something rooted more in personal frustration and what we're seeing as diplomatic slights.
And these perceived slides happened one after the other. In May, after a really tense India-Pakistan conflict, President Trump claimed he had mediated the ceasefire. India immediately and very publicly rejected that claim. Then, a month later, in June, Prime Minister Modi turned down a last-minute dinner invitation to Washington after the G7, saying he had other commitments. To this administration, apparently, those were seen as major snubs.
And this theory isn't just chatter. It's being backed up by serious financial analysis. The Jefferies Group, a huge investment bank, they put it pretty bluntly. They concluded that the unusually high tariffs were a direct result of the president's personal dissatisfaction, especially after he was denied what he saw as his role as a peacemaker in that India-Pakistan crisis.
All right, let's move on to Section 3, crisis in the tanneries. Because far away from the politics of Washington and New Delhi, this is where the crisis really hits home, in the Ambar-Ranipet belt in Tamil Nadu. It's the heart of India's leather industry. And for the people here, this isn't some theory, it's their daily life.
I want you to meet P. Gopi. He's 42, he's a cutting machine operator, and he's just been put on unpaid leave. And his words, they just cut right to the heart of it all. This isn't about spreadsheets and trade balances. It's about families struggling to pay school fees. It's about lives just thrown into complete uncertainty. And his story, it's just one of thousands.
And to understand why this industry is so vulnerable, you just have to look at how things are made. This isn't some automated factory floor. It is a truly labor-intensive craft. I mean, from cleaning the raw hides to tanning and preserving the material to dyeing it, and then all that final, intricate stitching. Dozens of skilled hands touch every single product. So when the orders from the U.S. just suddenly stop, all of those hands go idle.
And here is exactly why those orders are stopping. An American buyer is looking at this and sees a 50% tariff on goods from India, but only 20% from Vietnam. The choice becomes a no-brainer. It's just simple economics. Indian suppliers have been priced out of their biggest market, pretty much overnight.
And the scale of this shockwave is just immense. Across all sectors, we're talking about up to $48 billion of Indian exports being affected.
Just in that leather hub of Ambor, at least 50 factories have already shut their doors. And for the ones that are still trying to operate, U.S. buyers are now demanding discounts as high as 25%, basically forcing the exporters to eat the cost of the tariff themselves.
So now let's zoom back out for Section 4, Alliances at Risk, because all of this economic pain is now creating much larger geopolitical shockwaves. The damage is spreading way beyond the tanneries, and it's threatening decades of careful work building up this strategic partnership.
Former U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley called the whole situation a potential strategic disaster. And her point is really clear. For years, many in the U.S. foreign policy world have seen India as the single most important partner to balance China's growing influence in Asia. So to jeopardize that relationship, well, she argues it's a massive, self-inflicted wound. And you can already see the fallout. It's undermining the Quad security dialogue with Australia and Japan. There are reports that India has hit pause on major U.S. defense deals worth billions. And, maybe most critically, it risks pushing India, a country that has always prized its independence, closer to rivals like Russia and China. And this isn't going unnoticed. Key allies like Germany and Australia have openly criticized the whole thing.
The respected commentator Fareed Zakaria really summed it up. He said this move basically reverses decades of work by both Democratic and Republican administrations to build a stronger relationship with New Delhi. He pointed out that India was suddenly put in the same high tariff category as Syria, which is just a shocking reversal of its diplomatic standing.
Which leads us to our final section, retaliate with reform? This whole crisis leaves India at a major crossroads. Does it just retaliate and start a bigger fight? Or does it use this massive shock as a trigger for some fundamental economic reform?
Well, the immediate plan seems to be a pivot. Trade delegations are being rushed off to Russia and Africa to try and find new markets. Exporters are scrambling to leverage existing free trade agreements like the one they have with the UK. And back home, industry leaders are calling for government support and, this is crucial, programs to reskill all those displaced workers, maybe for other industries like textiles or even tech.
You know, some analysts are actually framing this crisis through this really interesting economic theory called the flying geese paradigm. The basic idea is that a huge external shock like these tariffs can actually force an economy to stop relying so much on low-tech goods and speed up its move into more complex, high-value industries. It sort of forces it to catch up and become a leader itself.
And that theory really hits home when you look at India's economy. For years, its exports have been super reliant on low-technology goods, which are the exact sectors that are most vulnerable to these kinds of tariffs. So what this crisis has done is expose a fundamental structural weakness that a lot of people say needs to be fixed.
As one exporter put it, adversity breeds innovation. So while this is incredibly painful in the short term, this tariff shock could actually be the very thing that forces India to diversify its economy, to invest in higher tech manufacturing, and to build a much more resilient export model for the future. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this just a temporary transactional trade spat that'll eventually blow over? Or are we actually witnessing the beginning of a much larger, more permanent strategic realignment, one with consequences that can end up shaping the global order for decades to come?